Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be looking at a NVIDIA video actually talking about why system latency matters, featuring the player himself, n0thing. Now this was actually tweeted by Valorant, so I thought, okay, let's have a look because most likely it's going to pertain to some level of CS and Valorant, and I know some of you are from that game, so let's jump straight into it.
Seth from NVIDIA, and today we're going to be looking at some common gamer myths and pain points and using system latency to explain what's really going on. System latency is the time from when your mouse button is clicked to when the resulting pixels appear on screen. We're going to be looking at high latency, medium latency, and low latency systems together with CSGO legend and Valorant streamer Jordan n0thing Gilbert, as well as a high-speed camera to see what's really going on. So Jordan, thanks for having us.
n0thing.
So, what competitive games have you been playing recently?
Lately, I've mostly been playing Valorant. Obviously, come from a CSGO background, but the novelty of playing a new game has been fun and a different challenge for me.
So what role does precision play in competitive games like Valorant?
Precision plays a massive role because, aside from trying to outplay people positionally or strategically, if you can't actually finish off the frag, then all the positions and strategic things you could do don't really matter. Every gamer I've heard that wants to compete at a high level wants precision.
Does responsiveness deliver precision?
I think to a certain degree, responsiveness equals precision because you want your mouse to feel like an extension of your hand. And if everything that your mouse is doing is responsive, that means everything at the other end of your mouse is going to be mimicked on the screen. And I can immediately tell when it's not doing what I want it to do.
So what is hit registration in games?
When I put my cursor on an opponent and I click, did it actually register when I shot while the crosshair is on their body, or did somehow they magically evade my bullet?
Let's put that to the test. Let's figure out how system latency impacts some of the biggest myths and feelings we get as competitive gamers. In this test, we're going to find out how much system latency impacts hit registration. As I'm testing this, I'm going to be running across garage doors, and n0thing is going to have no idea when I'm crossing.
Go for it. Wait, let me turn on the white noise. Using white noise right now because, Seth doesn't want me cheating. Hearing his keyboard clicks.
This is the medium latency system, running at about 33 milliseconds of system latency and about 144 hertz.
That looked on. Come on. Give me that.
All right, should we check the high speed?
I'm down.
We feel like you just hit your shot. So let's take a look and actually see what happened here. So here at the bottom, that green light will turn off when you actually press.
This is very interesting. Okay, here we go.
Your mouse button.
Okay, so I'm on him, I'm on him.
And then
it's off, and my crosshair is on him. My dot is on him. Seth.
Exactly. So you actually hit him.
Blasphemy.
So that shows that it's not perfect, basically, that's a bit annoying. I mean, anyone who knew this anyway knew this, but...
Now let's take a look at the high latency system, running at about 58 milliseconds of system latency at 60 hertz.
That's going to be impossible. Yeah.
That was going.
I mean, this here then obviously all depends on sort of some level of pre-fire potentially.
Camera.
So here we go. So the green light goes off right there.
See that's middle of his body.
This one is about 55 milliseconds, which was enough time for Brimstone to cross the doors and for us to actually miss that shot.
I didn't miss.
You didn't miss. You hit it. So actually what's happening here, their system latency is affecting the shot in two different ways.
But that's the thing that's important. He did not miss. He actually hit that shot, but the computer, the hardware, the architecture didn't quite allow for it to actually, which makes me wonder how often does this happen? Probably quite frequently.
The frame rate is lower. Our CPU side has longer latency, which means that the mouse is being sampled at a slower rate. Additionally, what we're also seeing here is a delayed view of the game world. So in reality, Brimstone is actually about 55, 60 milliseconds ahead of what we're actually seeing. So those two things are working against us. We're visually getting late information, and due to the frame rate and the higher CPU latency, our shot is going into the game state at a late.
Not to forget that we also need to look at client side versus server side. So
your time. All right, so now you're on 360 hertz, 360 FPS, super low system latency. Just
can't hear anything. Easy.
Ooh.
Like that.
Blinked.
All right, so that shot was a little bit easier, I think.
Yeah, it felt like I could have kind of went to recline mode and just kind of clicked without much effort. Timing just seemed easier.
You can see how the crosshair barely moves before the shot goes in. And so that's low system latency for you. It allows you to actually be able to hit what you're shooting at.
It just feels and looks so much smoother.
Let's jump into our second test, Peeker's advantage. What is Peeker's advantage?
Peeker's advantage to me is essentially, if I'm holding an angle, the person who swings in and tries to peek me essentially has an advantage.
How does Peeker's advantage impact competitive gaming?
When you outposition somebody and they don't know you're there, for instance, you would think, hey, I should have an advantage on reaction time, for instance, of them coming around the corner, and I should get the shot first and get the frag. Well, a lot of times with Peeker's advantage, what is essentially happening is even if you're holding one of these kind of off angles and someone comes into a corridor, they kind of appear on your screen in a way that seems quicker than they should, and you kind of have trouble leading the shot. So the person who ends up peeking into you that should be at a disadvantage is actually at an advantage.
What do players typically attribute Peeker's advantage to?
The net code of a game. Things that we don't truly understand as gamers, but you kind of just like put a vague term to. You're just like, they just don't have a good enough engine or something, and that's why it's Peeker advantage.
Often gamers attribute Peeker's advantage only to game net code or network latency. However, let's look at the role of system latency in Peeker's advantage. In this first test, we're going to be looking at our low latency system peeking into our medium latency system. And so when we actually peek through,
Oh, this is very good comparison, actually. Very good.
Major difference.
Oh my gosh,
Wow.
look at that.
Yeah. The wide swing, you like almost see his whole body when he sees like.
Oh wow.
And this is where you traditionally see Peeker's advantage exemplified, right? At that full speed wide swing.
And what's interesting here is the network latencies are exactly the same, both about 20 milliseconds of network latency. The angle advantage is the same, we're equidistant from that angle. So the only difference here is system latency. Next up, we have our medium latency system peeking into our low latency system. You look at that, yep, crosshairs are both
You'd
on.
almost neutralize Peeker's advantage. Like that's at least even, if not favoring the lower latency system, holding the angle.
Right. What's happening in Peeker's advantage is that imagine both the systems are getting the location of each other at the same time to the CPU. However, it just takes longer for that information.
These
to
are
be
really
rendered
good
on
infographics.
the higher latency system. And so really what you're seeing with your eyes, what the camera is seeing here, is just a later version of the world.
This is all I needed to see. Because like the fact, because that's the biggest advantage in, for instance, we're looking at Valorant, is when someone's holding an angle and you wide swing into a corridor, they generally just seem like lightning fast.
Yeah.
So essentially, if your system latency is lower than your opponent's, typically you can play Peeker's advantage to your benefit,
Correct.
whether it's holding or attacking.
And I believe when Valorant, roughly around the first time that they came out, in terms of, you know, when it was all being announced, released, all the information was coming out, all the hype was being built up, this was probably around the time that it was transitioning between Project A and Valorant. And Riot were really talking about, from what I remember, and I might be wrong here because they were talking about a lot of stuff, but if I remember correctly, they were talking about the fact that Valorant was going to have crazy good latency, you know, not too much Peeker's advantage, and we do still see it, which it's going to happen anyway. It's a technological thing, but it's interesting to see how it's interesting to see it in a video.
I have our low latency system peek our high latency system.
And actually, that's a question. Do you feel that you see this a lot in game? Do you feel like you lose to this a lot in game? Do you feel like you win with this a lot in game? What are your thoughts?
FPS 60 hertz is roughly, in this case, about 70 milliseconds at end-to-end system latency compared to 15 milliseconds at end-to-end system latency. On the low latency system, it's 55 milliseconds of additional Peeker's advantage that the low latency system is providing in this case.
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
It looks like a full model almost. All right, so now we're watching, I peaked with the 60 hertz, 60 FPS system.
I think in this case,
I think you're still.
I think it's anti-peeker's advantage.
Yeah, still by like 10% probably.
It looks like actually it does more than mitigate it. You still have the advantage while holding.
We're not telling you to hold every angle just because, but we're saying you might be able to.
As long as it's long distance multiplayer gaming, there's always going to be peeker's advantage. And so having low system latency is a good way to mitigate as much of it as you can.
Pro level, competing on a LAN environment with low latency system, that's going to be insane because now you're like fully almost mitigating peeker's advantage.
All right, so this is our last test. Let's start off by explaining what are flick shots.
A flick shot is essentially when you snap your mouse to a target and you're not really worried about acquisition. You're kind of just, you see the target and you're moving as fast as you can to said target.
So are flick shots important?
Bro, it's been so long since I've been in a practice range. I mean, it's got to be a month at least since I've been in a practice range.
Flick shots are a big part of any FPS in the sense that if you're only able to hit shots within your comfort zone, which is maybe like a small field of view in front of you, you're always going to be limited in kind of what situations you could save yourself from.
So what do players typically blame if they talk about hitting training plateau?
They either mention like not having good reaction times, some like hereditary reason, or occasionally their system, their setup, their ping. I think, quite frankly, people don't always really know what it is. I think, you just kind of trial by error.
So there's actually a recent IEEE publication that found that the reaction time between a new gamer and a professional gamer is only about 25 to 30 milliseconds. That's definitely in the range within system latency. So I think in this test, what we can go do is do some flicks in the range, see if there is a difference between these system latencies and our precision, and then try to quantify that difference by looking at our accuracy between high system latency and low system latency.
Using a high-speed camera, I'll be recording where n0thing pulled the trigger on each target, and using the NVIDIA Reflex Latency Analyzer, I'll record the system latency of each shot so that we can compare the average system latency of each case.
We take a look at the 60 results, we can see you're still very consistent linearly. However, the spread, and even the closer spread, the misses, they're a little bit more spread out.
Outside the shoulders a bit.
So 144, here we are. Still a nice linear spread. You're consistent as a player. Your mouse movement is pretty consistent. At 360, it's pretty grouped around the head. That range is about 6 milliseconds.
Quite different.
60 FPS.
That's quite different. It'd be interesting to see the percentage in difference
of variability
of this.
Just looking at system latency, it's cool to actually see that metric.
That's
huge. Just saying 360 hertz, like what does that mean? These are just a couple tests, and it's already showing.
It shows visually what's going on. Yeah.
What system latency represents to me
It's a very good representation.
is essentially the metric for what I've felt all along. I think I've always known what smooth gameplay feels like. I just never was able to put a number to it or the
measurement or metric, yeah.
Smooth that I experienced. Now that I know what system latency is, I'm going to be able to track and kind of gauge the difference of each system I play on, which is going to be awesome. Being able to quantify system latency with the NVIDIA Reflex Latency Analyzer is super cool. Not only for me to have like confidence in my own setup and to know where it's at and how it's performing, but when I go to a different setup and I want to see how it's performing. When I compare it to my friend's computer who has maybe similar specs and we really want to see, what is this subtle
difference
we're looking at here, we can actually put a number to it and gauge that and make sense of it. I think
that's actually quite cool.
At this point, system latency is something nobody knows about and no one thinks is important. And I think we're at a stage after today.
I personally believe that it's not something that no one thinks is important. I think it's most people don't care enough, maybe. Maybe don't, it's not, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just something that when you're playing the game, you just want to play the game. I think it's something that a lot of people will like to blame. That's just what humans do. We'll blame things on the computer, especially if we get angry at the game or something like that. But it's interesting to see all of maybe the error of I don't know how the flipped way. It's interesting to see how you can measure the error of the computer versus your actual skill level. We saw that n0thing actually hit those shots at the beginning with Brimstone at Garage, and yet it didn't actually come up as a kill because of the latency. But n0thing did indeed have his crosshair on Brimstone. Right, looks like it's time for me to get off this video because I can't speak anymore. I hope this video was interesting though. I found it very interesting myself. to see the measurements and the metrics that are being used, to see specifically actually in the training thing. This was very interesting because this really clearly visually interprets and measures the difference when it comes to latency and the accuracy of the shot, or the precision, or whatever you want to call it. That being said though, what are your thoughts on this? I'd love to hear your take on this. I found this really interesting, and I hope you did too. Of course, the link to this video will be in the description as per usual with every video that I look at, so if you want to take a look at it without my own thoughts, go ahead. But with that being said, I hope this video was interesting to you. If it was, a like is always much appreciated. If you want to keep up to date with everything happening on the channel, hit that subscribe button, keep notifications on. Have a great day everyone. I'll see you in the next video.